You've been living inside these laws since before you knew their names, every cycle that pushed you forward and then pulled you back. Every time a situation that seemed fixed suddenly shifted. Every moment when something you held in mind long enough finally became real. None of that was random. None of it was luck. 7 laws govern the mechanics of how reality responds to consciousness, and those 7 laws have been operating inside your life every single day, whether you recognize them or not. Right now, in 2026, something is changing. Those mechanics are becoming visible. The patterns are surfacing in ways that are difficult to dismiss, and a text preserved through more than 20 centuries of transmission carries exactly the framework for what you are about to see. Before we go deeper into this, if this kind of knowledge speaks to you, subscribe to the channel. This is where we keep building on this work together. 7 laws, that is the claim. Not 7 suggestions, not 7 philosophical positions, 7 mechanics that the Hermetic tradition held to be as operational as the laws of physics. To understand how that claim survived into the present, you have to trace the chain of custody backward. From the esoteric circles of early 20th century America, back through the Renaissance scholars who recovered the corpus hermeticum from Byzantine manuscripts, back through the Neoplatonic academies of Alexandria, where Greek, Egyptian, and Persian wisdom streams converged, and further still into an oral transmission so old that the written texts themselves describe it as ancient. The chain did not begin with any single document. The document was one attempt to crystallize what had already been transmitted for centuries. The word decoded in the title carries a specific meaning. These laws were not hidden in the sense of being locked away. They were hidden in plain sight, wrapped in language that functioned on 2 levels simultaneously. On the surface, philosophical. Underneath, operational. The philosophical layer describes. The operational layer instructs. For most of the text's history, the philosophical layer was what general readers encountered. The decoded layer, the layer that treats these laws as mechanics you can actively work with rather than ideas you can agree with, required a different kind of reading. That kind of reading is what this transmission is about. The first time someone encounters these 7 principles as a complete system, something specific happens. The tendency is to read them as interesting ideas about the nature of reality. Elegant, ancient, resonant, but abstract. The initiated reading is different. It does not ask whether these principles are philosophically true. It asks a more precise question. If this law is operating continuously, what does that mean for what I do next? The difference between those 2 questions is the difference between someone who knows the rules of a game and someone who plays it. What the mystery schools preserved was not the description of the game. It was the instruction on how to play it. Part of you already recognizes these patterns. The law that says everything moves and nothing rests. You felt that as the restlessness underneath apparent stability. The law that says, as above, so below. You've noticed it when the structure of a small situation mirrors something much larger happening in your life simultaneously. The law that says the swing in one direction carries the measure of the swing back. You've lived that, perhaps more than once. The recognition is already there. What this transmission provides is the vocabulary. And vocabulary, in this context, is not merely descriptive, it is directional. Somewhere in the long chain of transmission, a misunderstanding attached itself to these 7 laws, that they require belief to operate. The opposite is true. Gravity does not require belief. Neither does vibration, polarity, or rhythm. The Hermetic laws, as the tradition presents them, are not activated by accepting them. They are activated by recognizing them. The distinction matters enormously. You are not being asked to adopt a belief system. You are being asked to look at what is already operating and begin to name it correctly. In 2026, the operation of these laws has become unusually visible. And that visibility is itself part of what makes this a convergence moment. Write in the comments today's date and finish the sentence, "I am already living inside," and write what comes next as if it has already happened. Not what you want, what you are already moving toward, stated as complete. The specificity is the practice. 7 laws. The first is the one on which all the others rest. The all is mind. The universe is mental. When the Hermetic tradition makes this claim, it is not making the argument that the physical world is an illusion. It is making a more precise and stranger claim, that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, but the medium in which matter operates. In quantum mechanics, the phenomenon called the observer effect demonstrates that at the subatomic level, the act of observation influences the state of what is being observed. The Hermetic tradition takes this further, not as a quantum claim, but as a cosmological one, that the fundamental substrate of what we call reality is mental in nature, and that this has practical consequences for how a practitioner works with their environment. Somewhere in the Pacific, a tide chart plots the exact rise and fall of water over 12 months. That same chart, if placed next to a graph of certain cycles of human collective behavior, matches in structure: expansion, contraction, peak, trough. The second of the 7 laws describes this. Correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The Hermetic insight here is not that everything is symbolically connected in a poetic sense. It is that the same structural patterns operate across different scales of reality simultaneously. The macrocosm and the microcosm are not metaphors of each other. They are instances of the same underlying pattern running in parallel. Once you begin reading your personal circumstances through this lens, the macroscale events of 2026 stop being external and start being instructional. What does it mean that nothing rests, everything moves, that all things vibrate at a frequency that can be measured? The third law answers this not as a mystical claim, but as a description of a tuning mechanism. Frequency is not fixed. Consciousness carries a vibrational signature that is responsive to direction. The practitioners who understood this did not attempt to change their circumstances directly. They understood that circumstances are effects, and that frequency is the cause that produces them. The practice, therefore, is not to change what you see. It is to change the vibrational signature that generates what you see. The circumstances follow. The tradition does not present this as a spiritual comfort. It presents it as operational mechanics. Hot, cold, same thermometer, light, darkness, same spectrum, courage, fear, the same gradient measured at different degrees, love and indifference, not opposites, but poles of the same continuum, with every shade of human feeling located somewhere between them. This is the fourth law, polarity. The Hermetic insight that changes everything about how you work with unwanted conditions is contained here. You cannot destroy a polarity. You can transmute it, which means you can shift the degree, moving along the same scale toward the opposite pole. The practitioner who understands Law 4 does not fight what they want to change. They identify where on the scale it sits, and they apply directed consciousness to move along the scale. This is not suppression, this is transmutation. The Egyptian astronomers who tracked the movement of stars for centuries were not primarily interested in navigation. They were mapping cycles, the rhythm of expansion and contraction that underlies every natural process. The Vedic calendar systems, developed independently across the Indus Valley, preserved the same insight. Reality oscillates, and the oscillation follows measurable patterns. The fifth law, rhythm, describes this swing as a universal mechanic. Everything flows out and then flows in, rises and falls, advances and retreats. Paired with the sixth law, cause and effect, the insight becomes actionable. Nothing happens by chance. Every effect has a cause, and every cause generates an effect that reflects it in kind. The initiated practitioner does not respond to effects as if they were causes. They trace backward, locate the originating cause, and address reality at that level. If this content is speaking to you, let me know by liking this video. It helps more people find this work at the right moment. The seventh law is the most frequently misunderstood and the most powerful for those who grasp it correctly. Gender, as the Hermetic tradition uses the word, is not a description of biological sex. It is a description of two creative forces that operate within every act of generation at every scale of reality. The productive principle, receptive, gestating, manifesting. The generative principle, initiating, projecting, activating. What the mystery schools preserved about this law, and what modern culture almost entirely inverted, is that both principles operate within every individual, regardless of gender. Creative capacity, in the fullest sense, including material and circumstantial creation, requires both forces to be consciously activated. When only one is running, creation stalls. The condition that most people describe as knowing what they want, but being unable to bring it into form, is usually a law of gender problem, not a law of attraction problem. 6 laws nest inside a seventh. The seventh requires the other 6 to operate fully. This is why the Hermetic transmission presented these principles as a system rather than as independent tools. Law 1 establishes the medium, consciousness. Laws 2 through 4 describe the structural properties of that medium, its correspondence across scales, its vibrational nature, its polarity. Laws 5 and 6 describe its temporal behavior, the rhythm of how things cycle, and the causal chain that connects action to consequence. Law 7 describes the creative mechanic that generates new conditions within that medium. Using one law without understanding the others is like knowing a single chord. The progression requires the full instrument. In 2026, you do not decode the KYBALION by reading it more carefully. You decode it by recognizing it in what is already happening around you, in the events that seem contradictory until you name the law they're expressing, in the timing of what appears and what disappears, in the patterns that have been operating in your life long enough to be unmistakable. The decoding is not textual, it is experiential. The text is the map. The territory is your life. The practitioner who understands this stops reading the Hermetic laws as descriptions of reality and starts reading their circumstances as evidence of laws already in operation. The map does not change the territory, but knowing how to read the map changes everything about how you move through it right now. At least twice in recorded history, a convergence occurred where multiple Hermetic laws became simultaneously visible to those who knew how to read them. The most documented of these was the late 15th century, the period of the Florentine Renaissance, when Marsilio Ficino translated the Corpus Hermeticum into Latin under Cosimo de' Medici's patronage. The rediscovery of those texts coincided with a period of extraordinary acceleration in art, in science, in navigation, in philosophy. The initiates who recognized what was happening, Bruno, Ficino, Pico della Mirandola, did not treat it as coincidence. They treated it as a convergence window, an activation of principles that had been latent, becoming operational at an unusual scale. Why 2026 specifically? The honest answer is a convergence of cycles that no single tradition fully maps on its own, but that 3 independent traditions describe in parallel. The Hermetic tradition tracks the large rhythmic cycles of collective consciousness, the swing of Law 5 at a civilizational scale. The astronomical traditions of Mesoamerica and India mapped calendar periods in which cause and effect chains compress, where actions taken during specific windows carry disproportionate consequence. The esoteric Christian tradition, mirrored in Kabbalah and Sufism, describes years of particular resonance in the unfolding of a longer pattern. All three converge in the same general window, not on the same day, not even the same month, but in the same year. That kind of convergence in all three systems simultaneously does not happen frequently. Every moment of large-scale collective attention is a demonstration of Law 1 operating at scale. Right now, in 2026, attention is not dispersed. It is concentrated by circumstance, by technology, by the sheer volume of simultaneous disruption that forces millions of people to look in the same direction at the same time. When consciousness, which the first Hermetic law identifies as the fundamental medium of reality, concentrates at that level, the medium becomes more responsive. The practitioner who understands this does not wait for collective disruption to resolve. They recognize it as the exact condition under which directed individual consciousness carries maximum leverage. If you've been applying these principles but feel like something's still blocking the full result, like you can see the law but can't make it move, I left something for you in the first pinned comment. It's for those who are ready to break through. The frequency has shifted. You have probably felt it as something that doesn't have a name yet, a sense that the old responses to familiar situations are no longer working, that patterns you could predict have become unpredictable, that what required significant effort before now seems to move more easily, while what used to be stable has become strangely fragile. These are not coincidences or personal symptoms. They are Law 3 and Law 4 activating simultaneously. Vibration shifting at a collective scale changes the resonance conditions for individual frequency. And polarity, when the collective field reaches a tipping point between one pole and another, makes the transmutation easier for anyone who knows the mechanic. The old frequency is losing coherence. The new one is not yet fully established. You are inside the window. What is happening at the macro scale in 2026? The disruption, the restructuring, the simultaneous collapse of systems that seemed permanent, and the emergence of conditions that seemed impossible, is a direct correspondent of what is available at the individual microscale. Law 2 is not a metaphor. The correspondence is a mechanic. When the macrocosm is in a state of high flux, the microcosm is in its most responsive condition. The individual life that is aligned with the direction of the macroscale shift does not fight the current. It moves with a current that is already running in its direction. The question is not whether the shift is happening. The question is whether you are positioned inside it or outside it. The swing has been accelerating. You've felt it as the sense that things are moving faster than they did 2 years ago, that the gap between cause and effect has compressed, that what you hold in mind reaches manifestation faster, that what you resist or ignore also compounds faster. This is Law 5 in its active phase. The rhythm is not suppressed, it is amplified, and with it a peculiar quality of this moment. The inward swing, when it comes, is steeper than before. The practitioners who understand this do not panic during the inward phase. They use the outward phase for advance and the inward phase for consolidation, anchoring what was built before the swing returns. When a civilization stands at a genuine inflection point, not a crisis in the ordinary sense, but a structural reorganization of the conditions under which cause and effect operate, the causal chain compresses. Actions taken during this window carry a weight that identical actions taken during ordinary periods do not carry. The initiates who understood Law 6 at a historical scale always acted during the window, not after it. They understood that the cause and effect relationship is not linear and fixed. It is dynamic, responsive to the conditions of the moment. In 2026, the causal chain has compressed. A small action taken with full understanding of the law that governs it carries consequences that would require years of equivalent effort during a quieter period. This is not a metaphor. This is the mechanic. Why does creation feel blocked for so many right now? The answer, through the lens of Law 7, is not that people lack desire or intention or effort. The answer is that they are using one of the two creative forces and leaving the other inactive. Specifically, the generative projective force is fully engaged, the wanting, the intending, the initiating, while the productive receptive force is collapsed. The receptive principle requires space, stillness, and a specific internal posture that the current pace of collective life makes very difficult to sustain. The Hermetic practice for this is not to try harder. It is to deliberately create the conditions under which the receptive principle can activate, and to hold those conditions long enough for the gestation phase to complete before initiating the next generative push. The reason creation doesn't manifest is almost never a problem with the intention. It is almost always a problem with the receptive container that should receive and gestate what the intention has initiated. The relationship between the Hermetic tradition and quantum physics is not one of validation, as though the ancient texts were waiting for modern science to confirm them. The relationship is parallel. The Hermetic tradition describes the mechanics of consciousness from the inside, from the perspective of a practitioner working directly with the medium. Quantum physics describes the behavior of matter from the outside, from the perspective of measurement. When they converge on the same description, the significance is not that one proves the other. The significance is that two completely different methodologies, one introspective, one empirical, arrived at compatible descriptions of the same phenomenon. The observer effect, quantum entanglement, the non-locality of consciousness, these are not metaphors for Hermetic principles. They are independent observations of the same underlying reality. The convergence is mutual. In the temples of ancient Egypt, 7 principles were encoded into the architecture, the ritual, and the initiation sequences, not as 7 separate doctrines, but as 7 aspects of a single cosmological model. In the Vedic tradition, the same 7 qualities of the fundamental substance of reality appear under Sanskrit names that translate directly into the 7 Hermetic laws. In the Mesoamerican tradition, specifically in the cosmological structure of the Popol Vuh and the Aztec creation accounts, the same 7 structural properties recur, identified not as philosophical principles, but as creative forces that a practitioner could work with directly. 3 independent traditions, separated by geography and millennia, describing the same 7 mechanics. The redundancy is not coincidence. It is the signature of genuine discovery, the same phenomenon encountered independently from different directions. When all 7 laws are operating at a recognizable level simultaneously, the practitioner who understands the full system has leverage that is unavailable in ordinary periods. Each law amplifies the effectiveness of the others. Law 1 establishes the medium. Law 2 maps the scale of operation. Law 3 calibrates the instrument. Law 4 positions on the scale. Law 5 times the action. Law 6 traces the causal chain. Law 7 activates the creative force, working all 7 consciously, not sequentially, but as a single integrated system produces a different quality of result than working any single law in isolation. The convergence window of 2026 is precisely the condition under which this integrated operation is most available, most responsive, and most legible in its results. Right now, if you've been watching this carefully, something is happening in your recognition. The patterns are becoming nameable. You've seen the swing. Law 5. You've felt the frequency change. Law 3. You've noticed the correspondence between something small and something large. Law 2. These recognitions are not passive. They are the beginning of the operational layer becoming active. The moment a law becomes visible in your life is the moment you can begin to work with it intentionally, rather than being worked by it unconsciously. Being worked by a law unconsciously means experiencing its effects without understanding the mechanic producing them, which is the condition most people inhabit for most of their lives. That shift from unconscious subject to conscious practitioner does not require years. It requires recognition, and recognition is already happening. That moment is now. Something in you brought you here for a specific reason, not to understand these laws abstractly, but to use them. What follows is not philosophy. It is practice, and the first instruction of the practice is identical to the first law. The medium is mind. Before you change what is outside, you establish what is inside. Everything else builds on that. The sequence matters. Every Hermetic practitioner who left a record of their work, in Alexandria, in the Renaissance academies, in the esoteric circles of the early 20th century, described the same foundational step. Establish the mental medium first. The external shift is always downstream of that interior act. The laws describe how the medium responds. The practice is how you enter the medium with intention rather than accident. The practitioners of the Hermetic academies in Alexandria, those who had direct access to the full transmission, cultivated what they described as a specific quality of mental substance. Not directed thought in the ordinary sense of planning or problem-solving, not visualization in the modern sense of imagining desired outcomes. Something more precise, a sustained mental recognition of the desired condition as already constituted within the mental medium. They distinguished this sharply from wishful thinking. Wishful thinking holds a condition as absent and desired. The Hermetic practice holds a condition as present within the medium, not yet materialized, but already real at the level at which all material reality originates. The daily cultivation of this quality of mental engagement was the foundation of every other Hermetic practice. The morning anchor, before engaging any external information, before the phone, the news, the conversation, the first demand of the day. You take 5 to 7 minutes and you establish the mental substance. Hold the condition you are activating as already constituted, not as a visualization exercise, but as a recognition. The medium is mind. The medium already contains what you are building. The anchor in the morning is not the creation of something new. It is the maintenance of something already in progress at the level of consciousness. This is Law 1 as a daily practice. The practitioner who sustains this anchor without interruption for a minimum of 21 consecutive days will observe something that is difficult to describe to someone who has not experienced it. The external circumstances begin to organize themselves around the maintained mental condition, as though responding to something they cannot see. The law of correspondence is not primarily a tool for reading omens. Its operational use is diagnostic. When you encounter a condition in your external life that you want to change, the law of correspondence instructs you to stop looking at the condition as a problem to be solved and start reading it as a reflection of an internal condition that requires adjustment. Not adjustment of emotion or attitude in the popular sense, adjustment of something more specific, the structural pattern that the external condition is mirroring. The inversion that Law 2 enables is this. Instead of spending energy on the effect, you use the effect as a map to locate the internal cause. Once located, the internal cause can be addressed through Law 1, held in the mental medium as already transmuted, and the external condition changes as a matter of correspondence. How do you change your vibrational frequency? The tradition's answer is not through willpower, not through affirmation, and not through feeling a certain way on command. The frequency is changed through 3 simultaneous inputs: the quality of breath, slow, full, with conscious direction of the exhale; the quality of physical posture, Specifically, the posture that the body adopts when the individual is in their highest state of function, and the mental image of the target frequency held with the same precision as the morning anchor. When all three inputs align simultaneously, the frequency shifts. The shift is not gradual, it is immediate, and it is felt as a change in the quality of awareness, a clarity, a spaciousness, a sense of increased capacity. The practitioner who can produce this shift at will has operational access to Law 3 as a tool, not a theory. Two people walk into a situation where fear is present. The first person tries to suppress the fear, to push it away, to override it with a more acceptable emotion. The suppression fails, as it always does, because you cannot destroy a polarity. The second person, trained in Law 4, recognizes fear as courage measured at a lower degree. Not a different thing, the same thing, further down the scale. And they apply a specific internal movement, not force, not replacement, but a deliberate shift of degree along the existing scale. Toward the pole where courage sits, the movement is not large. It does not require perfect conditions. It requires only the recognition that the scale is continuous, that you are already on it, and that you can move. The practitioners who mastered this reported being able to transmute emotional states that previously felt permanent in a matter of minutes. Don't fight the swing. The initiates did not fight the rhythm. They timed inside it. They identified the phase, outward or inward, expansion or contraction, and they matched their action to the phase. During the outward swing, advance, build, extend. During the inward swing, consolidate, anchor, strengthen what was built. The practitioner who advances during contraction exhausts themselves. The practitioner who consolidates during expansion misses the window. The timing principle sounds simple. Applying it requires the kind of honest self-assessment that most people avoid, because it means acknowledging when the swing has reversed and acting accordingly, even when the momentum of habit pushes in the opposite direction. In 2026, the swing is at a phase that those who track it correctly will recognize as the outward expansion of a cycle that has been building for several years. The window for advance is open. The simplest instruction of Law 6. Stop responding to effects as if they were causes. Every undesired condition in your life is an effect. Every effect has a cause, and the cause is almost never where the effect presents itself. It is upstream, usually 3 to 5 steps back in the causal chain, located in a decision, a pattern, or a sustained mental condition that has been running long enough to accumulate consequence. The practice is not complex. When you encounter an unwanted effect, trace backward. Ask what produced this, then ask what produced that, then ask once more. By the third step, you are usually close enough to the originating cause that it is both recognizable and addressable. The practitioners who developed the deepest facility with Law 6 reported that after sufficient practice, the upstream cause became legible immediately, and the response to circumstances became causal rather than reactive. You have both creative forces inside you. Right now, in 2026, when the conditions of the external world are contracting, the receptive productive principle in most people, demanding speed, output, reaction, constant generative movement, the deliberate activation of the receptive force becomes the single most differentiating practice available. The instruction is not mystical. Create space. Before the first generative action of any project, any day, any creative sequence, deliberately open a receptive window. 5 minutes. A held question, not a held answer. The quality of receptivity that the question maintains creates the internal condition in which the generative intention can be received, gestated, and brought forward into form. Law 7 is not about balance in the popular sense. It is about the correct sequence. Receptive first, generative second. Every tradition that preserved this law, Egyptian, Hermetic, Vedic, Kabbalistic, agreed on the sequence. The receptive principle must be engaged before the generative principle is released. Here is what the initiated sequence looks like as a single practice, the way the mystery schools taught it, not as 7 exercises performed in turn, but as one sequence in which each law feeds directly into the next. You begin with Law 1. Establish mental substance. Hold the desired condition as already constituted in the medium. Then Law 2. Identify the macro correspondence that maps the direction of your desired outcome. What large pattern at the macro scale mirrors what you are building? Then Law 3. Calibrate frequency through the 3 simultaneous inputs: breath, posture, mental image. Then Law 4. Locate yourself on the polarity scale relative to your desired condition and make a deliberate degree shift. Then Law 5. Identify where you are in the current rhythmic cycle and confirm that this moment is an outward phase. Then Law 6. Trace back to confirm that no unresolved causal chain is running against the direction of your desired outcome. Then Law 7. Open the receptive container before initiating any external action. The full sequence takes 15 minutes. The practitioners who sustained it daily for 30 days reported changes they described as qualitatively different from anything produced by working with a single law in isolation. How does the Hermetic tradition describe Alexandria said through Florentine channels would unfold in the first 7 days of this practice? Not dramatically. The first change is perceptual. The laws become visible, the way a cipher becomes legible once you have the key. Patterns you dismissed as random start revealing structure. Timing you attributed to luck starts showing its causal chain. Situations you experienced as external impositions start reflecting something you can identify internally. This first change, the perceptual shift, is not a reward. It is the beginning of the operational layer activating. Once the laws become visible in their operation, you can begin to work with them consciously. That is the threshold. What you experience in the first week is not yet the full result. It is the confirmation that the decoding is real. The most common error in applying these laws, and it shows up in every tradition that preserved them, is treating the protocol as a tool for getting things faster. Speed is not the purpose. Alignment is the purpose. When alignment is correct, manifestation is not a target, it is a byproduct. The practitioner who applies these laws with the primary goal of accelerating acquisition will find that the laws seem to resist, not because the laws are moral arbiters, but because the orientation toward acquisition is itself a form of misalignment with Law 1. It positions the practitioner as separate from the desired condition, reaching toward something external, rather than recognizing the desired condition as already constituted in the mental medium. The correction is not in the technique, it is in the relationship to the outcome. Use the laws to align. Let the results be what alignment produces. The convergence window of 2026 amplifies everything. A vibrational frequency that would take 3 months to stabilize under ordinary conditions stabilizes in weeks. A causal chain that would take 2 years to compress under ordinary conditions compresses in months. A creative force that would require a full cycle to generate under ordinary conditions generates in a fraction of that time. This is not a promise. It is a description of what the convergence creates: a more responsive medium, a more visible correspondence, a more compressed cause and effect relationship, a more legible rhythm. The practitioner who enters the window with a clear understanding of the 7 laws and a sustained daily practice will observe results that look, to those outside the practice, like extraordinary luck or timing. From the inside of the practice, they look like what they are: alignment during amplification. February confirmed it. March is deepening it. What the remaining months of 2026 will reveal is a progressive legibility, each season adding another layer of visibility to the 7 laws operating simultaneously. The rhythm that the tradition always tracked at a civilizational scale is at a recognizable peak of its outward phase. The frequency shift that began in late 2024 is now in its consolidation stage, which means the new frequency is not still arriving. It is already here, available for those who can tune to it. The causal chains that were obscured for years are surfacing as effects. The creative window that Law 7 describes, the moment when the receptive, productive principle of a collective field is maximally active, is open. These are not separate phenomena. They are the 7 laws, operating at scale, making themselves visible at the same time. You came here thinking this was about decoding a text. The text was the door. What you've actually done, across the length of this transmission, is begin decoding your own situation through a framework that has been tested across 20 centuries and 3 independent civilizations. The 7 laws were not waiting to be discovered in 2026. They were waiting to be recognized in the patterns of your life that you could not previously name, in the cycles that seemed random until they were read through the lens of rhythm, in the conditions that seemed external until they were read through the lens of correspondence. The naming changes the relationship changes the result. Every generation that held this transmission faced the same question: pass it forward or let it dissolve. Each time someone chose to pass it forward, they made that choice under circumstances that were not easy, under suppression, under institutional opposition, under the pressure of systems that had strong reasons to prefer that this particular framework not circulate. The Alexandrian scholars who preserved the Hermetic texts when the library was threatened. The Renaissance initiates who recognized the Corpus Hermeticum when Ficino placed it in their hands. The practitioners in every century since who kept the 7 laws operational in living communities of practice rather than letting them become museum artifacts. Each link in that chain brought this moment forward. And this moment, the one in which you are watching this, is the next link. The KYBALION was not suppressed in the way that some texts were destroyed or hidden. Its preservation strategy was more sophisticated. It was available, but its operational layer was encoded in language that required a specific orientation to decode. The philosophical reader would encounter an elegant cosmological model and find it intellectually satisfying. The initiatory reader, the one oriented toward practice rather than understanding, would encounter a set of operational instructions that had been running continuously in the background of reality, available to anyone who could read them at that level. The encoding was the protection, not a barrier but a filter. Only those ready to use the operational layer would read it there. The fact that you are still watching, at this point in the transmission, is a reliable signal about which kind of reader you are. What separates those who activate these laws from those who read about them? One decision, not a permanent declaration of intent. A single decision, made once, to treat these laws as mechanics rather than metaphors. The practitioner does not decide to believe in them. They decide to apply them as if they were operational, to take the morning anchor, to read correspondence diagnostically, to calibrate frequency actively, to transmute rather than suppress, to time with the rhythm rather than against it, to trace causes upstream, to create receptive space before generative action. 1 week of that practice produces data. The data is more persuasive than any argument for belief. And once the data has accumulated, once the practitioner has observed the laws operating in their own life in real time, the question of belief becomes irrelevant. 2 people receive exactly the same information tonight. Same words, same 7 laws, same protocol. In 3 months, their circumstances are measurably different. not because one was more gifted, more fortunate, or more spiritually advanced than the other. The difference is a single decision made immediately after the transmission ended. One person filed the information under things they found interesting. The other applied Law 1 the following morning. The morning anchor. 5 minutes. The mental substance held as present, not as desired. 3 months later, the first person will describe their life as basically unchanged and will remember tonight as an interesting video they once watched. The second person will have difficulty explaining to anyone else exactly what shifted, because the shift happened at the level of cause. And causes by nature are invisible to observers who only watch effects. You now carry something that took centuries of transmission to preserve. 7 laws, their classical descriptions, their 2026 activations, their integration as a system rather than a collection of principles. The protocol that translates them from cosmological claims into daily practice. The Corpus Hermeticum was translated in 1463. The KYBALION was published in 1908. The tradition that both texts drew from extends further back than either. And all of it, through every hand that held it, every community that preserved it, every translation that carried it forward, was moving toward this moment. Not this moment as a destination, this moment as an activation point. A point at which the 7 laws become not only knowable, but operable, visibly, measurably in the context of your actual life. 2026 will not last. The convergence window has a duration. Those who enter it with the 7 laws activated will look back on this year as a threshold, as the year when the trajectory of their life changed direction at the level of cause rather than effect. Those who encounter this information and return to their previous orientation will feel the year pass, will sense that something was available that they did not fully use, and will not quite be able to name what it was. Both experiences are available. Both are governed by the same laws. The difference between them is made entirely in the period immediately following this transmission. In the days when the decision is still fresh, the protocol is still clear, and the convergence is still at its deepest phase. Something brought you here, something specific, not an algorithm and not coincidence, not because the universe arranged your YouTube feed with personal intention, but because Law 6 is operating. Every search, every click, every moment of attention you directed toward this subject was a cause in a causal chain that terminated tonight, in this transmission. You are here because you have been building toward being here. The causes were yours, and the recognition, the feeling that you have encountered something your circumstances required at this exact moment, is Law 2 operating. The correspondence is real, the timing is not accidental, and neither is the fact that you are still watching. 7 laws, 1 system, 1 convergence, 1 moment in which all 7 are simultaneously legible. Whether this functions as philosophy or as operational knowledge depends entirely on what you do in the next 24 hours. The Hermetic tradition does not offer encouragement in the motivational sense. It offers precision, and the most precise thing that can be said about this moment is also the simplest. You have been given the map and the protocol. The territory is your life. The laws are already operating in it. The only remaining variable is whether you read the territory as someone who has the map or as someone who has set it aside. Is it too late to begin? No. The window has a duration, but it is not closing tonight. The convergence deepens through 2026, with the most active phase still ahead. The first law is always the same regardless of when entry occurs. Establish the mental medium. Hold the desired condition as already constituted in the medium of consciousness. Begin with 1 morning, not a commitment to a permanent practice. 1 morning. And then observe what happens. The tradition does not ask for faith. It asks for a single trial with full application. 1 morning anchor fully executed. The data that follows will make every subsequent decision unnecessary. Somewhere in ancient Alexandria, a practitioner received this transmission and was told something that has been passed forward with it ever since. These are not ideas. They are instructions. Read them accordingly. The distinction is not subtle. It is the difference between every outcome the Hermetic tradition claims these laws can produce and no outcome at all. The text always existed. The tradition always preserved it. The protocol always worked for those who applied it. What changed tonight is the practitioner receiving it, which means you. The instruction from Alexandria applies now exactly as it applied then. This is operational knowledge. Treat it as such. 7 laws, already activating. The frequency has shifted and you have felt it. The rhythm is at its outward phase and you can use it. The cause and effect chain has compressed and your actions carry more weight than they normally would. The medium is mind and the medium is responsive. The correspondence between the macroscale and your life is not symbolic. It is structural. The polarity is at a transmutable point and the direction of transmutation is available. The creative force is waiting for the receptive container to open. All 7 conditions are present simultaneously. This is the window, not a metaphor for opportunity, not encouragement framed as cosmology. 7 specific mechanics, each operating at an elevated level of visibility and responsiveness, converging in the same period. The window is open. The practice is available. The only remaining variable is the practitioner who decides to enter it. Something made you stay until here. Attention of this quality, sustained over a transmission of this length, does not happen by accident. Some part of you already understands what these 7 laws mean for the direction you are moving in. That part does not need to be convinced. It needs to be followed. The part of you that knows tends to speak quietly, not through urgency or demand, but through the persistent quality of recognition that has been present since early in this transmission. That recognition is not mystical. It is law too, operating at the scale of your own inner life, a correspondence between what arrived here tonight and something already present in you that it mirrors. What you recognized because it was already there. Tonight gave it a vocabulary. What you do with that vocabulary is the rest of the work. The KYBALION was never decoded in the sense of being finally, completely understood. It was always decoded in the sense of being applied in specific practices by specific practitioners who observed specific results and passed the transmission forward. What happened tonight was a decoding of the operational layer. The philosophical layer was always available. The operational layer, the one that treats these laws as mechanics you can work with, not ideas you can admire, is what this transmission offered. The difference between knowing the 7 laws and using the 7 laws is the distance between the mind and the morning. The initiates of Alexandria were students. The Renaissance scholars who held Ficino's translations were students. The practitioners who received the KYBALION in 1908 were students. Every person who has applied these laws across the centuries and found them operational was, at one point, exactly where you are right now, at the threshold between knowing and using. The threshold is not a gate that requires permission. It is a decision, one that is made entirely on the practitioner's own terms, without ceremony, without initiation, without validation from anyone else. The chain of transmission passed through every kind of person. The only thing every link in that chain had in common was this: they decided to use the map. 7 laws have governed your life since before you knew them. The ones who documented them did not invent them. The ones who preserved them did not create them. The ones who applied them did not manufacture their results. They accessed mechanics that were already running. Tonight you gave them names. You identified them in their 2026 activation. You received the protocol. And something about that act of naming, of making visible what was already operating, has already changed your relationship to what comes next. not by adding something to your life, by making legible something that was already in it. Law 1. The medium is mind. Law 7. Creation requires both forces. Between them, 5 laws describe exactly how the medium operates, its structural correspondence across scales, its vibrational nature, its polar transmutability, its rhythm, its causal chain. You have all 7. You have the morning anchor, you have the protocol, you have the convergence window. The only piece that was never in the text, that no transmission can provide, is the decision to treat this as mechanics and not as philosophy. That piece is yours. It has always been yours. Every practitioner who activated these laws made the same decision independently, on their own terms, without ceremony or external validation. The decision does not need to be announced. It only needs to be made, and then acted on the following morning, with the first law, in the first 5 minutes before the external world begins its claim on your attention. Tonight, Law 1. Before you sleep or before you start tomorrow, 5 minutes. Hold the mental image of the condition you are activating as already constituted in the medium, not as imagination of something absent, as recognition of something already real at the level from which all material reality originates. The medium is mind. The medium already contains what you are building. That is not a spiritual comfort. That is the first of 7 operational mechanics that have governed your life since before tonight, and that you can now use consciously. 5 minutes. The full morning anchor, as the tradition describes it, the condition held as present, not as desired. No effort to manufacture a feeling, no forced visualization, just the clear, sustained recognition of what is already constituted in the medium. That is the first act. The 7 laws describe everything that flows from it. Someone watching this right now has just crossed a threshold they will not be able to uncross, not metaphorically, in the mechanics of Law 6. What was unknown is now known. What was unnamed is now named. The causal chain has already changed because the knowledge is now upstream of all subsequent actions. The effects of that change are ahead of you, not guaranteed by the transmission, generated by what you do with it. But the threshold itself is already behind you. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot unname what you have named. The only remaining variable is what you build from here. The KYBALION central claim is not that these 7 laws will change your life if you apply them. Its claim is more fundamental than that. These 7 laws are already governing your life, whether you apply them or not. The question the decoding answers is not whether the laws are operating. It is whether you are operating them consciously or being operated by them unconsciously. The shift from the second to the first is the entire work. And tonight, in this transmission, in the time you gave it, in the recognition that happened inside you as you watched, that shift has already begun. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "I am decoding." I've placed another lesson on your screen right now, your next step on this path. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.